It's been long claimed that plants grow faster with singing, that healing can come from music and singing itself, even though I would argue that my own singing would cause irreparable damage. I even thought about having an intro here where I break out in a musical, but I don't want to subject anybody to that horror. But it's definitely surprising to me that we've never really seen a show about people healing with singing. So when Healer Girl came out, it's like, well, that's only natural that we would have a show about characters that heal with their song. But this is my thoughts on the first 2 episodes of Healer Girl, a series that is airing in the spring 2022 anime season, so let's jump right into it. And maybe I might sing. Healer Girl opens up in a world similar to our own, but with one unique aspect to it. Now there's these people known as healers that can actually sing to heal wounds. And our focus zeroes in on 3 girls who are healer apprentices. They're not quite healers yet, but they're kind of training to become them. And they're all working at this one clinic where one of these such healers works at. And it kind of follows their day-to-day routine where they go to this clinic, they help kind of usher people into the waiting room where they're taken care of by this one healer. And then yes, shortly after, try to get this healer to train them. It's kind of one of those issues where you have in a lot of these types of stories where you have the apprentice who's trying to get that moment where, are we going to learn something yet? Are we going to learn something yet? And it never really happens. I don't know why that's such a trope, but at any rate, it is kind of instilled upon them very quickly. As we find out in the opening scenes, Kana, one of the girls, uses her singing to heal somebody. She gets reprimanded by it. It's something that they're not allowed to do. Under no circumstances, even their own blood relatives, if there's somebody hurt, they're not allowed to do their healing unless they become an official healer. Kind of hints at this idea that they possibly might do damage. I don't know, it hasn't really specifically said that, but obviously it's kind of shown that they can fail at their singing. A lot of the mechanics of this world and the healing aspects and the singing is kind of put into a clearer picture over the first 2 episodes as we see that, yes, there's actual records you can buy that can actually do healing attributes from it, but it's always kind of like general. It's very pharmaceutical. You can buy a record that has healing music in it, but it's very generic. Whereas actually seeing a healer in an official form, they can kind of tailor the music and the healing to the specific person. A really good example of this is at the end of the 2nd episode, you have this pregnant lady who is going into labor. And these apprentice healers are trying to just comfort this pregnant lady until help comes, but they fail to tailor it to the pregnant lady. And the idea that they focus so much of their attention on soothing the pregnant lady, but not the child. So again, it's putting a lot of emphasis on it not just being you sing and everybody's healed. It has to be tailored and controlled and have no faults in the singing. Each note transfer has to be perfect. Otherwise, the process itself will fail. And I think, again, that's what they were trying to instill early on with this idea that they can't heal just anybody, and they have to be official. They have to get a license to do this. It's just like any other medical field. It takes time and it takes training in order to actually put lives in your hands. But yes, taking a step back, a lot of the focus in the first episodes goes in on Kana. She's pretty much the main character of the show. She's very quirky. She loves helping other people. Her whole desire was kind of instilled upon her when she was young and she was on a flight and she was having struggles. But this healer came to her, sung to her, and helped her. So she always wanted to be a healer. But yes, she seems to have an issue with not helping people when she's not an official healer. And this gets her in trouble. And then obviously later on, it becomes a struggle for her as a really well-known client of this particular clinic is in trouble. And she tries to do everything she can to comfort this old lady until it eventually spawns her image, as they call it. Apparently, whenever somebody does one of these songs, an image can appear. And in this particular case, it's these dancing girls that are kind of floating around her. And it evolves as she's doing this, which is kind of a shock to her master that's currently training her. This is apparently an oddity. And as we get into the 2nd episode, we get more into a rival character, essentially. This Sonia, who essentially runs this other clinic, and she really wants to, I guess, prove herself by beating the clinic that Kana is at. And again, like I said before, this leads in them having this whole situation with this pregnant lady where she's trying to prove herself by helping this pregnant lady. And then, yes, the master of this other clinic that she's rivaling comes and does it much better than she can. Besides Kana, the other 2 girls that are at this clinic is Reimei, and she is extremely obsessed with the head of this clinic. She just basically foams at the mouth anytime she can get some sort of time alone with her. She she really likes her. And then you have Hibiki, who's kind of more like she's very subtle. She's very soft-spoken. She has almost a little bit of a ditziness to her. Very, very quirky in certain ways. So yes, a lot of focus on these three girls. They're working together, their quirks together, the things they're trying to overcome. Kana going in for her provisional license and all the fears that she has with the written exam, the things that they require to know about in order to heal people. All those things come into play. And yes, lots of singing. So, my thoughts on Healer Girl. I'm sort of mixed on this show. I'm not really, really hot on it, but I will say that after the second episode, I am pretty sold on the show. Like, if I can get the sort of storytelling they gave me at the end of the second episode, it seems like a lot of these episodes are kind of ending on these really high points. Like, the overall show itself, each episode isn't engaging the entire time, but it always seems to end on some really strong points. Like the first episode having the whole situation with the old lady, Kana trying to help her. This, again, the image that appeared, the evolution of it, and what she did and the gratification that she got from helping this lady was really fantastic. And then again, in the second episode, getting more into this whole rival thing, but then ending on this really powerful note about how they have to tailor their music to their patient and how that was really thrown in their face at this particular point was a really strong story beat. And yes, a really visually beautiful scene to really sell you on that scene. The music, again, and the visuals, and again, the storytelling it's giving were these very impactful points. But again, I hesitate because the whole show isn't that. There's a lot of kind of lulling points where you just have the characters hanging out, not really doing much. Yes, it's setting a tone for the character and their personalities, but then relying too much on these similar comedic beats that I don't really want to see so many times over and over again. Yes, like I mentioned before, Remy and her obsession with Karasuma, their master, they get a little old. But I think the thing that I enjoy kind of sprinkled throughout that is having some pretty funny points. I think Hibiki is an absolute dork. I love the whole thing where they're wanting to stay over, and so she's like, oh yeah, by the way, there's this little weird face that you can kind of see in the corner of the room, and then later on having her get terrified by it. It's just these really goofy comedic beats that they'll kind of throw in there now and then. Having Remy, despite the fact that I get frustrated with how much obsession she has with her master, break out in some sort of song about how much she's obsessed with her, just out of nowhere, just getting way into it. But I think the cool thing that I kind of found with a lot of their interactions is getting a little more insight into the world of being a healer. There's a lot of thought put into this world and the healing process. It's not as simple as you sing and you heal people. It's not just a show about idols that get on the stage and they heal the whole world. It's really trying to ground it in reality. As I mentioned earlier, a healer sort of has to have a basic knowledge of the medical field. They have to know how the body works. They have to know about pharmaceuticals. They have to know about all these things that a normal doctor would have to know. It's not as simple as I sing a song and everybody's happy. This is something in this world that's a profession. It's something that's taken seriously. And again, going back to my whole statement about them pressing on these characters about how they cannot perform healing on anybody until they get their license is because there's an actual craft to this. There is a seriousness to this whole thing. And it doesn't play it out as healers are sort of the easy route. It doesn't make it out as if healers can heal everything. There's still the necessity for doctors and hospitals because it sort of implies that they can't heal everything. That there's still a necessity for the medical field outside of healers. It was also interesting in the second episode getting into Sonia, which I said earlier was pretty much the rival character. She's from a different clinic, and they sort of introduced another side of this whole thing and this idea of a healer and a composer, sort of implying that Sonia, which is the main girl of this other group, she's already like a C rank healer. Like she's already kind of getting into the field itself. She's kind of a prodigy, and so to speak. But it sort of hints at this idea that Shinobu, who's working at her side, is sort of her composer. They have this whole point, which again, with this lady that's pregnant, Shinobu holds out her phone with this whole song playing from it as sort of the song that she wrote for her. But again, sort of hinting at this idea that because it was so generic, it didn't necessarily fit the situation itself. So the focus was on sort of a general use of a soothing process upon one person, not necessarily on them as a pair. So I'll be curious if that's something they'll kind of explore more going forward. So in the end, yes, I have my hesitations on the show because I do believe it has lulling points, but I think overall, I'm very impressed by the show. Again, my first impressions with the show was that it was just going to be girl goes out on the stage, sings, everybody's healed, happiness. I wasn't really expecting it to be so grounded in reality, to really flesh out this idea of a healer being a profession. There's mechanics to it that the girls have to learn, that there is a craft to it, a professionalism to it that I really, like I said, I wasn't really expecting. And getting into that kind of stuff has really been interesting to me. And like I said, it has some really high points, having these points in which they do actually perform, and you get those kind of conflicts with being able to perform what they need to perform versus what actually gets results. And again, a lot of really fantastic music to get to it. I mean, if you're going to have a show about singing to heal, you're going to have some good music. And again, following that up with some really great visuals. Studio 3 Hertz has done some really fantastic stuff in the past, and I really do feel like they're shining here. This is an original series, so obviously they're going to probably put a lot of effort into it. I think they're pulling it off so far. I'm really impressed with what they're doing so far with the series. But if any of that sounds interesting, definitely check it out. I recommend it. So far, I really am recommending it. But if you do check it out, let me know in the comments down below if you're enjoying it or not, or if you're going to be checking out, let me know in the comments. If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'll be doing coverage of all the shows of the season, doing my first impressions of each and every one of them, as well as choosing certain shows to do my weekly impressions on them. I'm not sure yet if this will be one of them, but I am interested in it, so we'll see if the third episode really does keep my interest. As always, if you want to support us more, we have a Patreon link and a tips link in the description below. We also have a merch site where you can buy your stuff and support us. We definitely appreciate everybody that does, and y'all take care. And no, I'm not singing.